So to begin talking about color in Photoshop, I want to talk about the color picker. When I click the foreground color and the color picker opens, it's available to see the HSB, or the hue, saturation, and brightness color model settings, the RGB, red, green, blue, or subtractive color model settings, the LAB, the lightness and A and B channel settings, and the CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, which are the additive or print color settings referring to 4-color process ink. Currently my color setting is on white, and this box that I am circling within is actually the saturation and brightness box. So if I pick red and the hue says 0, that is the very top position of the color wheel, or midnight. And as I slide this slider, you can see the number that is changing in the HSB area, right over here, is the degree of the color wheel that represents hue. So this slider is called the hue slider. The hue slider. So once the hue slider has landed upon the hue of your choice, you can see that this hue is 220 degrees on the color picker. These two areas of the color picker represent whether or not the color is CMYK safe, and in fact this is not a CMYK safe color. And this yield sign with the exclamation point in it represents the fact that this is a problem color for ink to print. If I want to adjust this color from its very saturated appearance to a more adapted CMYK printable color, I can click, and now I have a truer representation of what that color would look like when printed. Something interesting to notice is if I go back up here to this position, and again I click on the exclamation point, these values here really didn't change, which is quite weird. Why are those values not changing? The reason is because this color picker has to show simultaneously the RGB model, which is subtractive color, using light to subtract other light. And I'm going to draw a little diagram on the board about this. And it also has to show the CMYK model at the same time. Otherwise you'd have to have multiple color pickers. This box here actually represents not hue, but the saturation and the brightness. So saturation means the amount of color in a color, and that occurs left and right in this box. So if you think of watercolor paint, and you dip the paintbrush into water, and then you swish it around a little bit in the blue paint, you would get maybe this kind of a baby blue color. But with that very same pigment square, with longer time swishing around on that pigment square, there'd be more color in the color, and longer you soak up pigment, the more saturated the color gets. So you can think of, when you're talking about saturated, dilute color, and then saturated, more color in the color. Make sense? Then we have the top and bottom sliding, where we're looking at, I'm going to kind of land more in the middle here, we're looking at less about saturation than we are about brightness, how much light is either shining on the color or the lack of light shining on the color. Truly, there's no such thing as darkness. There's only lack of light in color. So we're removing or taking light off of the color, less light shining on the color. So we have hue, saturation, and brightness. When you know specifically a color's value in CMYK, using a color swatch book, you can dial that color in numerically, 76 and 60. If you're trying to guess a color, how it's really going to print in CMYK, you might be shocked as to what colors truly will print and will not print. And it's helpful to purchase, if you're planning on doing print work, a CMYK process swatch book. A CMYK process swatch book will help you to identify the true look of a color based on correlating the values of sundry colors. You can purchase this CMYK color swatch book. They are not inexpensive. And yet at the same time, since I was just looking at one last week, it's up here in my Amazon, this is something you may really want to own. You should keep it in a drawer so that it's out of light and won't fade. But what this does is it allows you to get a true representation of colors based on the correlating of values of various tones and shades. There's, I think, 24,000 colors in the book. And this page right here represents just a mixture of magenta and cyan with nothing else, starting at 5% magenta in this corner and 5% increasing 10, 20, 30, 40. So this is just magenta with 5% cyan, with 10% cyan, with 15% cyan. So if I were to say this random swatch right here, knowing how this works, I can see that this is 30% cyan and 50% magenta. So whatever that is in the book is what it should really look like when it prints. So 30/50, I come back over to Photoshop and I dial that in. Hopefully I didn't just transfer that. 30/50 versus 30/50. I think that's what it was. Okay, so this is what it looks like in Photoshop. And though it is small, 30/50. See what's happening? And this is 40, 45, 50, and 30. So neither one of these really looks like the color that you see here. So it's very important to understand that you're not seeing true color when you look in Photoshop. Now, this piece of artwork that I have has some very frightening colors in it. It actually printed very well. Yet, if we look at it here in Photoshop, I know for a fact that there are colors that are out of range of print value. So if I click on this bright orange here, there we go. It actually looks a lot more orange when it's in the design, and a lot more red when it's over here, because it's standing by itself, and within this field of vision it's surrounded by other color. And now I can see the values of this are 87 and 100, and the true color is more when it prints closer to that. And if I have a color swatch book, I can look up exactly how that's going to print. Now, despite the fact that some of these colors are out of range or out of gamut, G-A-M-U-T, gamut for CMYK printing, Photoshop does give us the ability to get a better idea of what this color would look like by switching the screen mode. The setting for proof colors, and that's a little bit better, but I don't know if you could even see it shift. I could see it shift. It does sometimes tend to not look like it shifts that much up here, but you can see it looks less saturated when I go to proof colors. And now I'll put it back off again. And then there's this other setting in here called gamut warning. Gamut warning lets you see any colors that are in danger of not printing the color that you think they're going to print. And it does this by, when you switch on this option of showing you everything that will not print the color that you think it's going to print in gray. So this gray patches represent all colors that are out of gamut. So serious. So this artwork, again, I'm going to go back to gamut warning. Should we let her in? I think so. She's a nice person. And if I go to mode and I change this from RGB to CMYK, it's now going to convert it, and it still looks like there's plenty of colors here that just look super out of gamut, despite the fact that I've just shifted into the CMYK color space. When we go to gamut warning again, it doesn't show the gamut warning. So it should be okay. That's what we're hoping for. Okay, so that's the first thing I wanted to talk about. The Photoshop color box, color pickers, and what gamut ranges look like, and understanding that the color that you think it's going to print may not be really what it's going to print. Okay, so that's the first one for tonight.